The first time my sister finally understood that my silence could ruin her, she was standing in my dining room in a white suit, smiling at strangers under my chandelier, while a deputy asked whose name was on the deed. 3 hours earlier, I was barefoot in a hotel hallway, staring at my phone, watching my home fill with people who had no idea they were stepping into a trap of her own making. My name is Nora Whitman. I am 29. I manage donor relations for a children's hospital, and a year after my father died, I bought the little house he loved most on our street. I painted every wall myself. I refinished the hardwood with my own hands. I cried in the empty living room the night I got the keys because it was the first thing in my life that felt fully mine. My sister Holland always treated that fact like a personal attack. The motion alert came through while I was leaving a fundraising dinner in Providence. At first I thought the curtains had shifted, then another alert hit, then another. I stepped away from a table full of surgeons, balanced my glass on a hallway console, and opened the camera app. For a second my brain refused to understand what it was seeing. My foyer was crowded with women in cocktail dresses and men carrying gift bags with gold ribbon. Someone had moved the entry bench and turned my sideboard into a drink station. A balloon arch blocked half the staircase. My living room was packed with strangers holding wine glasses over the rug my father helped me choose. A waiter in black crossed my kitchen with trays of crab cakes like he had every right to be there. And in the center of it all was Holland. She had one hand lifted, a glass in the other, laughing like a bride at her own reception. Behind her, over my fireplace, was a rented sign in glowing script that read, "Cheers to the new regional director." I called her. She picked up on the third ring, breathless and annoyed. "Please tell me this is fast." I heard music behind her, glass clinking, the full confidence of someone who had already decided I was the unreasonable one. "What is happening in my house?" I asked. She made a little clicking sound with her tongue. "Relax. It's my promotion party. In my house." "Oh my God, Nora, it's one night." My grip tightened on the phone. "I am watching almost 100 strangers in my living room." She laughed. "That is such an exaggeration." As if to mock her, the front door opened again. More people stepped inside. Another woman was taking selfies on my stairs. "Holland, this night isn't about you," she said, her voice sharpening. "I am not stopping for anyone." There it was, the line that made something inside me go still. In our family, Holland's feelings always arrived dressed as emergencies. Her breakups became everyone's problem. Her small achievements needed giant stages. If I objected, I was cold. If I stepped back, I was proud. If I cleaned up after her, everyone called her spirited and moved on. I looked at the screen again. One guest had opened the pocket doors to my father's study, the one room I kept closed when I was away. My pulse went loud. "Tell them to leave," I said. She sighed. "No." One breath, two. "Did you use my name to book these vendors?" No answer. "Holland, they needed a property contact." I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was calmer than I had any right to be. "Did you tell them you owned the house?" She went silent for half a beat, then brightly, "I told them it was the family residence," which honestly isn't a lie in spirit. That was Holland's favorite kind of theft. The kind she could wrap in sentiment. I ended the call, not because I had nothing to say, because I knew exactly what she wanted now. A screaming match she could replay for our mother, proof that I was dramatic, jealous, ruining her special night. So I made one quiet call instead. I called Marlowe, the attorney who handled my purchase and my father's estate. I told him my sister had accessed the property without permission, invited commercial vendors, and appeared to be representing the home as some kind of family venue. He listened without interrupting. "Do not announce what you're doing," he said. "Save everything. Screenshots, call logs, and if any restricted documents are in that study, get eyes on the house now." That made my stomach drop. My father had left behind boxes of old partnership papers from his construction firm, including records tied to a disputed parcel still inching through probate. Nothing glamorous. Plenty dangerous enough for gossip, real estate opportunists, and my sister, who had the survival instincts of a raccoon in expensive heels. I called my neighbor next. Selah lived across the street and noticed everything. She answered in a whisper. "I was about to call you. There are cars lined up halfway down the block. Can you do me a favor?" I asked. When I went back to the live feed, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and watched my own house like it belonged to evidence, not memory. A rented photo backdrop had been set up in my dining room. My buffet table was covered in branded gift boxes stamped with the logo of Holland's company. She had not just thrown a party. She had turned my home into a corporate stage set. That was when the practical side of the nightmare hit me. If one person got hurt, if one vendor claimed damage, if one drunk guest tumbled off the porch, this came back to me. My insurance, my address, my liability. Holland had not just invaded my space. She had borrowed my risk. I started taking screenshots in silence. Then I saw the first thing that made anger give way to something colder. A woman in a navy dress stood near the fireplace talking to Holland. I recognized her instantly. Aria Bennett, senior vice president at Holland's company. Holland had not thrown this party to celebrate a promotion after the fact. She was still auditioning for it. I watched Arya point around the room while Holland nodded eagerly. Then Holland led her straight toward the study. "No," I whispered. My phone buzzed with a text from Sella. "Your front walk is packed. Also, your sister told people this is her late father's house, and she's finally taking over family hosting." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Finally taking over. That family language again, the same soft poison. Dressed up as legacy and belonging. My father builds. I maintain. Holland arrives in heels and claims inheritance through performance. Another text came through. From my mother. "Holland says you are being impossible tonight. Please do not humiliate her in front of her executives. We can talk as a family tomorrow." I laughed once. My home was being used like a ballroom. My late father's things were in strangers' hands. And somehow the emergency was still Holland's embarrassment. I muted the conversation and kept watching. The study camera was off because I never installed one there, but I could see the doorway from the hall cam, and within minutes people started drifting out of it holding folders. One man tucked a packet under his arm while laughing with another guest. Holland followed them, talking with both hands the way she did when she wanted to sound successful. I could not hear her, but I knew her face when she was selling a story. This was bigger than a party. I opened the shared document folder my father had once used for house records, hoping I was wrong. Half the scanned files were still there. Deed copy, insurance policy, trust correspondence, renovation permits. Then I noticed the most recent login was not mine. Earlier that afternoon, someone had accessed the folder from Holland's tablet. Another call came in. "Marlowe again. I checked something," he said. "A temporary event rider was requested against your address yesterday. The contact name listed was Holland Whitman. Can she do that? She can request anything, but if she used your documents to support it, this has crossed into fraud exposure." Outside my hotel window, traffic moved in ribbons of red and white. Inside my house, waiters carried desserts through my kitchen while my sister smiled like she owned the future. Something inside me settled into place with the clean finality of a lock turning. I did not call Holland back. I called non-emergency dispatch. The deputy listened carefully while I explained that I was the sole homeowner, out of town on work, and that an unauthorized commercial gathering was being held inside my property under possible false representation. He asked if there were alcohol service, paid vendors, or access to private files. I said yes to all three. His tone changed. "We'll send someone to make contact," he said. When I hung up, I expected to feel shaky. Instead, I felt almost peaceful. For once, I was not managing Holland's emotions before my own safety. I was just telling the truth to the right person. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from an unknown number. Salah had apparently given my contact to a man on the sidewalk who wanted to clear something up. The image showed a glossy welcome placard beside my front door. "Please join Holland Whitman for an intimate executive celebration at the Whitman House." Beneath that, in smaller script, were words that made every hair rise on my arms. "Future site of the Whitman Foundation Spring Showcase." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. My house. My father's name, a fake foundation, executives, folders from the study, an event writer. Holland was not only using my home for one reckless night, she was building a public story around ownership and access before anyone could stop her. Back on the live feed, she stepped into the foyer with a microphone and smiled like she was about to make an announcement that would change everything. Her smile had that polished warmth she used when she wanted strangers to mistake entitlement for charm. "I just want to thank everyone who believed in me," she said, lifting the microphone. "This house has always been more than a house to my family. It is the beginning of something bigger," Holland went on. "My father always wanted our family legacy to become a real community foundation, and tonight is the first informal step toward that vision." My father hated performative charity. He once told me that the second generosity becomes branding, it stops being generosity. Holland knew that. She was using the dead because he could not interrupt her. Then the front door opened again. Two deputies stepped in, not loud, just steady enough to pull oxygen out of the room. The music faltered. Conversations broke apart. Holland's smile vanished. One deputy spoke to her first. Another moved toward the bar. Holland laughed, then gestured around like this was all a harmless misunderstanding. Arya stopped smiling. A waiter set down his tray and disappeared. My phone lit up with a call from Holland. "Did you do this?" she hissed. "I protected my house. Tell them this is family property." "It isn't. You know what I mean." "Actually, I do not." She inhaled hard. "If you ruin this for me, I swear to God. You already used Dad's name. You already used my address. You already pulled files from a locked room. I am done helping you pretend that makes us even." For the first time all night, she sounded uncertain. "What files?" There it was. Not innocence calculation. I kept my tone flat. "Enough." I ended the call. On the screen, the deputies began separating vendors from guests. One of them took information from the bartender. Another asked a question that made Arya turn directly toward Holland, with a look so cold it almost made me pity her. I switched to the porch camera. My mother, Greer, rushed through the gate in a coat thrown over pajamas. She went straight to Holland. Even from the grainy feed, I could read her face when she realized corporate people were involved. Not concern for me. Social panic. A minute later, my mother called. "What have you done?" she whispered furiously. "What has Holland done?" I asked. She said this was a small work gathering. I am looking at hired staff, alcohol service, branded displays, and guests walking out of Dad's study with my documents. My mother went silent long enough to tell me she had not known that part. Then she recovered. "Even if she made a mistake, you do not send law enforcement into your own sister's event. My own sister staged a business fantasy inside my house. That is such a cruel way to phrase this. Is it inaccurate?" Her voice thinned. "Your father would be heartbroken to see his daughters tearing each other apart." "No," I said quietly. "He would be heartbroken that one of them keeps setting fires and the other was trained to apologize for smoke." She hung up on me. She paused in the foyer while one deputy spoke to her. Holland tried to approach, but Arya stepped back before Holland could touch her arm. That tiny motion carried more humiliation than any shouted argument could have. Another guest followed Arya out, then another. The room started emptying fast. If you like stories where calm boundaries hit harder than screaming ever will, like, subscribe, and support the channel. Alright, now let me take you back. By the time I reached home the next afternoon, the house looked composed from the street. The smell hit first. Stale champagne, perfume, fried food, wax. My entry runner was muddy. One wall near the staircase wore a long gray scrape. The brass bowl from my foyer table was dented. And in the middle of my kitchen, sitting straight-backed on a stool, was Holland. Neither of them stood when I walked in. I set down my bag. "Where's my study key?" Holland blinked. "Seriously? The key?" My mother tried a softer tone. "Nora, before we escalate again," I looked at her. "You can be quiet or you can leave." That landed. My mother closed her mouth. Holland gave a small, ugly laugh. "Wow. The hotel trip changed you." "No, last night clarified you." Her eyes were swollen from crying, not regret. Reputational grief. "You are acting like I robbed a bank. You accessed locked files in my home and used my address to present yourself as something you are not." "I did not use anything important." I held out my hand. "Then the key should be easy to return." She dug in her purse, tossed it across the island, and folded her arms again. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You brought an audience." My mother jumped in. "We all agree this got out of hand." I laughed under my breath. "No. You want to call it out of hand because that sounds mutual." It was not mutual. Holland stood so fast the stool legs shrieked against tile. "I was trying to build something. For all of us. No, for yourself." I walked past them to the study. 2 folders were missing from the cabinet. One held probate correspondence tied to a disputed parcel my father still legally owned through the estate. The other contained drafts of a charitable trust proposal he never filed because he was not going to let family turn grief into branding. My stomach turned. I went back to the kitchen. "Who did you show those papers to?" Holland looked at my mother. My mother looked at the floor. That was answer enough. "Who?" I asked again. Holland lifted her chin. "A consultant." Nothing happened. And then Sela knocked once and let herself in. She held a padded envelope. "You might want this now," she said. Inside was a flash drive. "The catering manager came by this morning," Sela said. "Once she realized your sister was not the owner, she remembered they were asked to record a short reel before the speeches." I turned the drive in my fingers. Holland went pale. I plugged it into my laptop right there on the counter. The footage was clean and bright. Guests praising Holland. Slow pans of my living room. Then near the end, a private setup shot before the speeches had begun. Holland stood beside a man in a charcoal suit I had never seen before. He held one of my father's folders. "I can position it as inherited family property transitioning into foundation use," Holland was saying. "Once the title issue clears, my sister will come around. She always does. Worst case, my mother can pressure her. We just need executive buy-in first." The man asked, "And you control access to the house?" Holland smiled. "Practically speaking, yes." The silence after that clip felt holy. I looked at Holland. "That is all the context I need." But Holland was already unraveling. "You do not understand how close I was. This could have fixed everything." "Fixed what?" "My career," she shouted. "My life. I am tired of always being the one who almost gets there." I stared at her. "So you offered my house and Dad's name as a ladder?" She said nothing. I called Marlowe on speaker. I told him I had video evidence of my sister falsely presenting access and control over estate-related property and using private documents to support a nonprofit pitch. He asked me to send everything immediately. Then I called the locksmith. Holland laughed once, thin and disbelieving. "You cannot be serious." I met her eyes. "Watch me." The locksmith arrived before sunset. So did the cleaner. So did a courier from Marlowe's office. Holland packed in violent little bursts, crying when she thought no one was looking, then turning hard again whenever she caught me watching. When Holland dragged her last bag to the door, she paused. "You are really doing all this over one night?" I looked past her to the scraped wall, the dented bowl, the trampled rug, the empty slots in my study cabinet, and finally to the laptop where her own face waited frozen mid-lie. "No," I said. "I am doing this over the whole pattern. Last night just made it visible." So she left. My mother lingered a moment longer. "I never meant for it to go this far." I believed her, which was the saddest part. "You never mean for it to go anywhere." I said. You just keep asking me to survive it quietly. She cried then. Like tears could still make me return to my assigned role. They could not. She walked out without another word. The house grew still in layers. Metal tools clicked at the front door while the new locks went in. The cleaner gathered broken glass and wilted flowers. Sela opened windows to let the smell out. I carried my father's folders back into the study, slid them into the cabinet, and this time locked it with a key that belonged only to me. A week later, Holland's company announced an internal restructuring. Her promotion was gone. A formal note arrived through legal channels confirming that any representation tying my property or my father's name to future events had been withdrawn. Practical, bloodless, final. Family gossip swelled for a while, then thinned when no one got a dramatic response from me. I did not fight for my image. I kept my house. I kept the footage. I kept my peace. The last thing I removed was the tiny nail above the fireplace where Holland had hung that glowing sign. I patched the hole, painted over it, and stood back while the wall dried. By evening, the room looked like itself again. Mine. And when the sun dropped low and lit the floorboards gold, I realized the payoff had never been watching deputies shut down her fantasy, or seeing executives walk away from her smile. It was this: a locked front door, clean air, my father's paper safe in the next room, no footsteps but my own. She wanted my silence because she thought it meant permission. She found out too late that silence can also be a boundary with teeth.